I made coffee with my French press earlier today,
Nice.
and it's like drinking mud. So I
I
made
don't
the
know.
I made the extra strength version, so I'm probably gonna be doing backflips in about a half hour.
I don't know. I don't know what mud tastes like. I like coffee.
Well, I do too, but sometimes I wonder that the thing that I'm making has the consistency of something else.
It's possible. I mean, the grounds are in it.
Yep.
Exactly what the French press is all about. Doesn't hold back all the grounds.
Not quite. It's got quite the interesting little bit of consistency to it. You know, it's
No
not
doubt.
it's uh it's not your boring ass coffee.
No. So what do you think of this lousy March weather?
I mean, listen, I'm not a fan of smarch in general. We
Well,
always well we always get a snowstorm like middle of the month, and then there's always something that comes in at the end of the month.
that's usually how it works. Unfortunately, even this
Yeah.
winter, unfortunately, that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's just um like clockwork. No matter what's happened in the previous several weeks, like we will always get a snowstorm somewhere in the second half of the month, and
I
that
feel
just completely screws up everything.
well, the Sierras are getting
Because
socked.
everybody, yeah, well, they got their own problems, but
Yes.
the everybody's putting away all their snow shovels and all that stuff right now, and I'm like, guys, it's March, we're gonna get something. I don't know when, but we always get hit with something.
Yeah, I had the thought of putting my elevator. Oh, pfft, sorry, that just slipped my mind. My snowblower my away today, and I was like, no, it's only March. Just got off of February.
Beware the Ides of March. Isn't that the line from Julius Caesar?
Perhaps so.
I think so. Yeah. Well, it's true when it comes to winter weather around here. Well, while people are filing in, we have a few minutes. We'll get started at 10 after. Why don't we do the announcements right now while people are still making their way in? Um, we have, let's see, on my side of things, Gribble Nation, you know about the blog series that I'm coming out with twice a week on the Mississippi River, so that's still ongoing. YouTube wise, I'm working through new uploads of I 25 in Colorado, so that is an ongoing thing. That will continue through the middle of the month, I think, and then we'll see what happens after that. I want to give you guys a little bit of a recap of my winter trip here for a couple minutes. This is actually the first show that I'm doing at home in the home studio in about a month. So it's good to be back home in front of, in my home studio here at Wiz headquarters. We had the trip in Florida was about 16 days. It covered 6,300 miles behind the wheel. It yielded about, I would say, about 600 video files. I'm still in the process of going through all the files that were filmed in 4K resolution. I started processing those files immediately after getting home about a week ago, and I believe after tomorrow I'll be finally through everything from west of Florida, so Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. And then there's probably going to be at least a week of video processing ahead for the stuff from Florida. So that would have been the Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa, St. Petersburg areas. Um, all in all, it was a great trip. It was my first real time spent in Florida in over 8 years. And those three major metro areas in the central and northern part of the state were the featured areas of coverage this time around. I also got around to completing the rest of the interstate system in the states of Georgia and Florida. The pieces that I were missing of I 75 and I 10 were completed. And so that's kind of the gist of that trip. It was good to get away for a couple weeks. The weather was really nice, and as you guys of course have heard about many times by this point, we had the road meet in New Orleans thrown into the middle of all that, and that was a lot of fun too.
No,
I even got to see my co-host this evening down there in person.
woohoo!
How about that?
How about
Um,
that?
yeah. So the other thing that to keep an eye on is the 4K video that was filmed with the GoPro. That's probably going to start to appear on the channel as early as the second half of March. If you're a channel member, you'll probably see it before then, but most people will see it probably starting as early as March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. So I will get around to figuring out an upload schedule for all of that. I would like to expedite that content first. I'd like to get the 4K stuff out of the way before I return to standard definition video of locations to be determined. So that is the deal. I have Sconson with me this evening. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing good. And you?
I've, in the words of Howard Eskin, I've never had a bad day in my life.
That is good.
Yeah, I've had bad moments. Lord knows I've had bad moments, but never bad days.
Never
Every
a dull
day,
moment.
well,
Never a dull moment.
yeah. Well, in road enthusiasm, that's true, isn't it? Every day that you wake up is a blessing, right? So you can't if you wake up today, you can't say you had a bad day.
That's exactly it.
So we are talking about the Houston metro area tonight. This is part one of a two-part series. Tonight we're going to focus on the interstates and the freeways of the metro. Part two, which will be done next week, will focus on the Harris County Toll Road Authority and the tollway system, which is it exists sort of in parallel with the freeway system. And we'll dive into the tollways next week, but tonight's subject of conversation is the freeway system, or the freeway component of the Houston metro area transportation network. So let's get into some numbers here. Houston, or H-Town, as it is commonly nicknamed. Over 2 million people as of the 2020 census. The top 5 in the United States, both in city population and in metro population. We're over 7 million in Greater Houston. Founded in 1836 as a settlement on the Buffalo Bayou, known as Allen's Landing. It was incorporated as a city in 1837. The new settlement was named for General Sam Houston, who at the time was the president of the newly formed Texas Republic. I have to say that before we go any further, for those of you who don't know, Sam Houston was a bit of a badass. Let me just run down his resume for you. He was a general in the Texan Army during the Texas Revolution of 1835 and 36. He served as the first president of the Texas Republic, starting in 1836. After serving as president of Texas, Texas was, of course, annexed into the United States in the 1840s. He served as a United States Senator from Texas from 1846 until 1859, at which point he was elected governor of the state of Texas in 1859 and served until 1861. He resigned in that year. He was opposed to the secession of Texas into the Confederate States of America. He was officially deposed as governor in 1861. Texas seceded anyway, despite his opposition to the move. He felt that the idea of secession and the long war for independence for the Confederate States of America was a folly. He died in 1863 before he was ultimately proven right. The Galveston hurricane of 1900 is another significant event in Houston's history that we should mention. Up until that point, the city of Galveston was the largest port city in Texas. It was the commercial hub of the seaborne economy in Texas at that time. The hurricane that struck on September 9th, 1900 is believed to be the deadliest hurricane in United States history. It made landfall at Galveston as a Category 4 hurricane with what is believed to be sustained winds of 145 miles an hour. It's estimated that anywhere between 6 and 8,000 people lost their lives in the storm and the flooding that took place. The storm led to the reevaluation of Galveston as the region's most important port city, and the shift in the balance of economic power towards Houston took place shortly thereafter. Houston took really the top spot economically in southeastern Texas, and they never relinquished it.
Because of the ship channel.
Yeah, and also because they wanted, after Galveston really scared the hell out of them, they wanted their big ports to be a bit further inland.
Yep.
So, and Houston was perfectly placed to fill that role.
New Orleans kind of fills that role as well, but yet it's still more vulnerable because of the low-lying areas.
Yeah. I want to mention outer space for a second. Houston is also the home of the Johnson Space Center, which was completed and founded in 1961. It was known originally as the Manned Spacecraft Center before being renamed in honor of President Lyndon Baines Johnson. This is a very important facility for NASA. It's where their spaceflight training and their spaceflight control are conducted.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yet that's why he talks to Houston in that moment, because all their in-flight command is operated from the Johnson Space Center in Texas.
And every time you hear heard on the space channels, they're always talking between the spacecraft name and Houston.
Mm-hmm. But you guys already knew that. You didn't. Obviously, you didn't need us to tell you that. The other thing that I want to mention economically about Houston is that it is, this may not surprise you, but it is a Gulf Coast leader in energy and transportation. Obviously, the interstate system of the Southeast sort of converges on the Houston area, and the energy sector is a huge part of the city's economy. I want to skip ahead here a couple of slides. Let's look at some downtown pictures here. Houston always sort of was the king of Texas. It was one of the big hubs in the Texan side of the energy sector. However, in the years beginning in the 1980s and really accelerating in the years after Hurricane Katrina, Houston sort of became the dominant corporate center for the oil industry in the Gulf. New Orleans used to be a significant corporate hub for this industry. However, after the storm, a large amount of the population of New Orleans, there were roughly 90,000 black families who were displaced permanently by the storm. Most of them initially relocated to Houston, and the vast majority of those remain in Houston to this day. Other cities such as Dallas and Memphis and Atlanta also took in people who would be considered to be Katrina refugees to some degree.
So, it's like at one point they were using the Astrodome, like they were using the Superdome for, well, not exactly like, because they had that a little bit more prepared.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that they were sent to the Astrodome originally, and that's ultimately how so many of them ultimately settled in Houston afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, the corporate oil and gas industry that was in New Orleans eventually relocated to Houston. There's not really a big corporate presence in New Orleans anymore. So Houston is really the king city of the Gulf Coast when it comes to the oil and gas industry in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. All right, now we can talk about sports really quick. I will try to give you as succinct a version of this as I possibly can. Let's talk about, well, we'll start with the baseball team, the Houston Astros, who were founded in 1962. They actually had a really cool original name.
It's true. Colt 45s.
The Colt 45s, that's right.
Yeah.
They were only known as that for 3 seasons.
I wonder why they made them change their name.
Well, a couple of reasons that we'll get to in a second. They were known, so their full name was the Colt 45s, but they were referred to commonly as the Colts, named, of course, for the popular model of revolver handgun that was popular in Texas at the time. They were renamed the Astros in 1965. That had more to do with them wanting to become branded in a way that paid tribute to the city's association with the space race and NASA. Of course, the Johnson Space Center had opened a few years earlier. Houston also was starting to become known as the Space City as a result of that. So they wanted to tap into this new brand of identification. So the Astros name was born, and that's how the Astrodome got its name. It was the first domed stadium in the United States, and it was really a benchmark in the construction of sports venues in the United States and North America. Everything
still stands today, but it's empty, pretty much not being used.
Yeah, I believe that's right. I don't think it's used for anything, because all the event space, all the events that are held down there are held at Energy Stadium now.
Yeah.
So I don't think the Astrodome is used for anything. It was a trendsetter and a game changer in the design of stadiums in the U.S. In fact, the masterminds behind the Superdome in New Orleans looked at the Astrodome and said, "I want one of those, except bigger." So it really was the gold standard of stadium construction. It ushered in a new revolution in this medium of engineering, one that continues to evolve to this day. All of the domed stadiums that you see lining or littering our cities in North America owe their existence to the Astrodome. By the way, the Astros banged on garbage cans to the tune of 2 world championships, beginning in 2017 and then most recently in 2022.
I imagined that they were putting holes in those garbage cans.
Yeah, they were just very musically inclined. That's all. They weren't trying to gain any advantage whatsoever.
No, are you sure about that?
Absolutely.
Oh wait, that was the sign stealers.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Let's see. The Houston Rockets of the NBA, they were founded in 1967 as the San Diego Rockets. They relocated to Houston in 1971. They won 2 NBA championships in 1994 and 95, led by one of the great centers of all time, Hakeem Olajuwon. The Houston Dynamo FC were founded in 1996 as a charter member of Major League Soccer, but they were founded in San Jose as the Earthquakes. They relocated to Houston in 2005. In their time in Houston, they have won the MLS Cup twice, in 2006 and 2007. University of Houston has a pretty prominent place in the area's fabric when it comes to athletics. Every once in a while,
they're number 1 in the rankings right now.
What is that, in men's basketball?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've been good now for a couple of years, haven't they?
That they have. I mean,
yeah.
They're the small team that Gonzaga used to be. Gonzaga has kind of fallen back to earth now, and Houston has come up to take their place.
Mm-hmm. I see. Every once in a while, there's chatter about a possible NHL expansion franchise in Houston. The league is really looking to expand beyond the 32 teams that they currently have. So we will have to see what happens with that. And I saved the best for last.
Of course.
Yeah, you know where I'm going with this.
Right, the flaming thumbtacks.
Well, they're only just part of the story here. The football history in Houston is very complicated, and I could go on for an entire show just discussing this topic, but I will try to keep it to 90 seconds or less. The Houston Oilers were founded in 1960 as one of the 8 original members of the American Football League, which eventually merged with the NFL at the end of the 1960s to create the modern league that we have today. The Oilers left Houston at the end of 1996 because their owner was a dick and would not negotiate with the city of Houston on a new stadium deal, so he packed his bags and he went to greener pastures in the state of Tennessee. They played 2 seasons as sort of nomads in the late 1990s as the Tennessee Oilers before being rebranded in 1999 as the Tennessee Stupid Crap Face Thumbtacks. And they currently reside in Nashville to this day. The departure of the Oilers at the end of 1996 left Houston as one of the largest metro areas in the United States without an NFL franchise. This was rectified in 2002 when the league expanded to 32 teams and the Houston Texans were born. Interesting to note that the Texans are one of only 4 franchises in the NFL to never play in the Super Bowl, although it is a little bit unfair to group them in with the other 3 because the Texans are they're the newest franchise in the NFL, and obviously they would be the newest franchise in this group of teams. But it's them, it's Jacksonville, it is Cleveland, and it is Detroit. Those are the last 4 teams to never play in the big game as of right now.
You wish that Detroit had that chance this year, though.
Well, they kind of had their best shot this year, I would say.
Right, but the teams that beat the teams that were in the Super Bowl were the 2 best teams.
I would agree. I think so.
Yeah. I mean, you can only go for it on first down so many times. Moving on.
Yeah, well, you are allowed to kick the field goal sometimes.
Precisely.
Yep. So
Energy
the Texans,
Stadium?
Yeah, so the Texans play at NRG Stadium, which is right next door to the Astrodome. Other landmarks in the Houston area, the San Jacinto Monument is pretty prominent if you're on the east side of Houston. It's a 567-foot tall monument. I believe it is, what is it built of? It's masonry that it's built of. It's the world's tallest masonry column. It's actually taller than the Washington Monument because you know what they say.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Everything's bigger in Texas, that's right.
Come and take it.
This monument was completed in 1939, and it was built to commemorate the Battle of San Jacinto, which was the decisive battle of the Texas Revolution. The battle took place on April 21st, 1836. The Texan army, led by General Sam Houston, defeated the Mexican forces in a rout 6 weeks after the fall of the Alamo in San Antonio. The battle established Texas as an independent republic from Mexico, and eventually they would be assimilated into the United States about a decade later.
We are the Borg.
On my first visit to Houston in 2018, the battleship USS Texas was docked on the other side of the San Jacinto Monument in battlefield grounds. This is not the case as of the recording of this episode in 2024. The ship was towed away in 2022 and has been under repairs for the last couple of years. Apparently the hull had really gotten into bad shape. So it's been dry docked.
Look at that rust on the side.
Yeah, well, it's been dry docked for the last couple of years, and they're currently looking into a new permanent home for the ship somewhere along the Texas coast. And to my knowledge, a final decision on a new location has not been reached as of the recording of this episode. The USS Texas was commissioned in 1914. She is a New York-class dreadnought battleship. One of the few battleships in the U.S. Navy to actually not be present at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. At the time, the New York and her sister ships were stationed on the East Coast. So she was not a part of the Pacific Fleet that was the main target of the Japanese Imperial Navy. And that's a big reason why she's still here today.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention one other thing here. In these 3 pictures, you will see the most prominent skyscraper, the tallest building in Houston, is the Texas Commerce Tower, which is now known as the J.P. Morgan Chase Tower. It was completed in 1981. It is the world's tallest pentagonal building, which for all you kids out there, that means it's a 5-sided building. It is 75 stories tall, and its roof height is 1,000 feet. Now, I want to...
5 levels, 5 sides. It's definitely Texas.
Yeah, it doesn't. Most angles of this building that you look at, it doesn't look like it's a five-sided building because it's not an equilateral pentagon. It's not like an equilateral pentagon would be the Pentagon in Virginia, right?
Right.
Like that's not quite what we have here.
No, you're
Um,
not gonna. They're not. If they're gonna draw everything like equilateral pentagons, it would be boring.
yeah, but why do that when you can just be Texas and do whatever you want?
Precisely.
Yep. Okay. The route of the Texas or the Houston freeway system dates to the master plans of 1952 and 1953, which the the earliest of these master plans you can see on your screen on the left. And what you notice right away is that they really had a pretty good idea of what they were looking for right off the bat. And most of what was built really owes its existence to this original master plan from the early 1950s. The plan for freeways was tweaked a little bit in the early 60s. That's the map on the right here. But again, you can see how if you were to overlay the map of today on top of really both of
Yeah.
these, it's basically the exact system that was drawn up decades ago. It's quite remarkable, actually, that
I have to say that with freeways here definitely differ than what you see on in the Mid Atlantic and Northeast because they had their constraints in there. Plus, you also had the revolts that happened there. I'm not saying they don't happen here, but they just were a lot looser in there. From my best guess on this is, by the way, opinion is that there may have been revolts and such and like that, but their direction stayed on course.
yeah,
It's
you will notice that the vast majority of the Houston freeway system and tollway system, for that matter, got built, which is unusual for a city of this size. It's unusual of most cities in general, but
right.
for a city the magnitude of Houston, for them to basically, if I go back here to this slide from the 1953 plan, they got their first guess pretty much spot on, and that's very hard to do. It's pretty, as I said, it's pretty amazing that they got it as right as they did. So
Yeah,
that
and
was the 50s plan, and then the 60s plan tweaked it a little bit, and then the 70s plan, which is on this slide, took the original plans and they didn't really change it, they just expanded it. So
yeah,
now we're way out into the suburbs because suburbia has gone wild in this part of Texas. And you
well,
can see how there's now a second loop that's outside of the 610 loop, and now there's a third loop that's even starting to show up. Um, yeah, they knew about the Grand Parkway in the 70s. They kind of knew that that's where suburbia
exactly.
would go in the future, and they were absolutely right about that.
Exactly.
That's the thing that I find so interesting about the Houston plan in particular is that we look at it as outsiders and we can't believe that there was this much suburban sprawl all the way out into the boondocks in all directions. But Texas and Houston planners knew this was coming 50 years before it happened.
Certainly looks like some of the beltways that they have out in the Asian countries and even in Europe for that matter.
Yeah.
Paris, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I can equate that belt line that it cuts off of the freeways into Paris as the same as the 610, except the peak freeways continued here.
Right.
And the M25 in London, for example, too.
Yeah, yeah, that one's on my bucket list to clinch someday.
Take your time on that one.
Yeah, well,
Anyway, moving forward.
I have the standard camera, and I now have the GoPro camera. So
Seriously.
I
Now
have.
you got it, and you have to drive left-handed. Remember?
Yeah, well, that's gonna throw me off, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I might want to start like in Ireland or something like that. Get the hang of it. Because nobody drives the motorways in Ireland. It's just like you and like a bunch of sheep on the highway. That's about it. Yeah, pretty much.
Chopped liver.
So again, you notice how the freeway system of today, that's the slide that we're looking at here. You notice how similar that looks to the slide or the maps from the 50s and from the 60s, right? That's kind
More
of
so the 60s and the 50s, that's for sure.
yeah, it is. It's basically exact. It's exactly what they were looking for. If we zoom in a little bit on downtown, yes, there is a loop. There is a freeway loop around the immediate central business district that you can drive, at least for the time being. You know, we will talk about the fact that that is not going to be entirely possible in the years ahead. But for now, it still is. And if we zoom out to the region as a whole, you will notice that, yes, a lot of this outer loop that was planned as far back as 1970 has indeed taken shape. And all the other amounts of suburban sprawl in the area have led to Houston being it kind of has the dubious distinction of having 3 beltways. Because there's so many damn people there.
One thing to note about Houston, compared to the other Texas cities that you have around there, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston's surrounding counties around Harris County all basically had the slowest speed limits in Texas. All of them having a 65 max, and that still stands to this day. Is that they all still have a 65 mile an hour limit. This was the result of what they called an environmental speed limit initiative. They did the same thing in DFW, but the latter has basically kissed it goodbye and said, nope, we're going back to what we had before, which was 70, 75, especially on the Tex Express. But yet Houston, yeah, you're going to have to watch out for those cops out there, you know.
Yeah, right.
And speaking of big freeways...
Yeah, well, let's start with what I consider to be the quintessential Texan freeway. If I was to say to you that you had one freeway to drive in the state of Texas that sort of encapsulates everything that Texas is all about in terms of their planning and construction of freeways, I would tell you to drive I-10 heading west out of Houston. The Katy Freeway, as it is known, connects downtown Houston with the far western suburbs. It actually runs all the way out to, as part of the I-10, it runs all the way out to San Antonio. It was part, obviously, of the original 1950s and 60s master plan. Construction began in the early 1960s. By 1968, the freeway was complete all the way out to Katy. Several different modifications have been made to this freeway over the years, starting in the year 2000 when the HOV exclusive flyover ramps were built that connect the freeway with downtown Houston. Those were completed in the year 2000. The more recent major expansion took place from 2004 to 2008, where the main lanes of the freeway were expanded and the new introduction of tolled managed lanes were added as part of this project. The toll lanes are also known on signage and sometimes are referred to in documents as the Katy Tollway. However, they are part of the same I-10 corridor. They are not a separate highway with a separate designation.
I would imagine that they did the Katy Tollway and the different signs to kind of get around the fact that they don't want interstates to be tolled.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know what the explanation for that is, although that it is possible that had something to do with it.
Yeah, because they're getting the funds outside what the Interstate Highway Act would expect, and there's approval processes they had to go through, which is what Pennsylvania struggles with. But honestly, I think Texas has the right idea. You don't need the red, white, and blue shield in order to get a new road.
That is true. Texas. I mean, if anybody can figure out their way around the rules, it would be Texas.
Oh, of course, they do
Um,
it the right. They do it the right way. Um, but yeah, including at one point in the freeway, you're going to have up to 26 lanes, and that includes the tollway portion, the freeway portion, and the frontage roads.
Yeah, that whole, like, all three of those were expanded or introduced into the I-10 during that expansion from back in the early 2000s. The tollway lanes are managed and operated by Texas DOT. They are not operated by Harris County, which is a bit of an exception to the broader rule in the greater Houston area.
Yep. The various counties that work with Easy Tag network manage all the roads around there. That's a next week topic. This like the express lanes up in Dallas are DOT managed.
Right. Yeah. Well, the situation with the counties in the Houston area doing their own thing is a mess that needs to be unpacked in its own episode. So it's a good thing
Speaking
we're
of
doing that
Texas,
next week. Oh yes, another quintessential Texan experience. I've been to several different Buc-ee's. I've been to, like, on the last trip I was on in Florida, I went to the one in Daytona. There's one in Warner Robins, Georgia that I stopped into. My favorite one so far is the one in Katy, which is like they have like 550 gas pumps or something like that. It's probably not even that many, but
Jesus.
it's a huge complex gas station convenience store, and yeah, and Scott, you can go in and get world famous jerky and brisket and burritos
And beaver nuggets.
and beaver nuggets.
But you can't sit to eat them. That's the thing. And you can't wash your window unless you brought your own squeegee.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. They have their reasons for doing this. People might object to that, but this is America. You can do whatever the heck you want.
I just gotta bring my own squeegee.
Exactly.
And don't mess with Texas either.
Yep, they say it right there.
It's right on the label, right?
Mm-hmm. You could have a show on Buc-ee's and how they're expanding and like that, because like you said, you went to one in Florida. There's one in Tennessee. There's a couple in Alabama, North Carolina, Virginia. If I get that wrong, forgive me. And there's more to come. You have to say, Indiana's going to get one. Wisconsin's going to get one. That's in the plans. We'll see how it goes.
I know they're building at least one in Louisiana.
Yep.
Like along I-20, I think. And they
Lafayette.
might even be building one along I-10 in Louisiana near Lafayette. That's sort of the newest rumor that's going around.
Did you happen to find any In-N-Out burgers in Houston?
I don't think so, although I wasn't really looking for them.
I didn't blame you.
They are in Dallas, I know that.
Yep. I have this personal rule of wanting to sample something that is rooted in it, that was founded in a certain area, in that certain area. I was happy to be able to sample In-N-Out in California where it belongs. And yeah, I'll be sampling Buc-ee's before they reach Wisconsin, that's for sure.
It did feel a little weird that I was consuming In-N-Out in Dallas.
Yeah,
That was a little
it's
strange.
not right.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty much limited to Dallas, but one has to check and see and make sure that there's nothing in Houston that goes like that. I mean, if you want a full sampling of things, go to Phoenix. They got In-N-Out,
right.
They got Waffle House, they got Culver's, they got Whataburger. It's all the retirees bringing their franchises in.
Yeah, like the Phoenix Valley and Florida. Those are like the places where you can get pretty much anything you could possibly want. Yep.
They don't have In-N-Out in Florida yet, though.
No, that's true. I wonder if the In-N-Out that I went to in Dallas is the farthest east one there is.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Yeah, because I wouldn't think that there would be any even
Nope.
as far east as I-35, but there are a couple in the Dallas area, I think.
Mm. Anyway, let's go to
Anyway,
the
yeah, I don't
beast.
want to. I'm getting hungry talking about food. The East Freeway leading away from downtown Houston to the east, so out towards Beaumont and Louisiana, is nicknamed the Beast. That's because the city of Baytown, no joke, they protested the fact that their city was not listed on the name of the freeway. It's been known on planning documents forever as the East Freeway. But somebody in Baytown didn't like that, so they just said, and Texas was like, fine, whatever. So they attached the name Baytown to the freeway, and for short, it's known as the Beast.
Oh, poor
Built,
things.
yeah, it's stupid, but
It's political.
it was also built the early to mid 1960s. It's something of a rarity in Houston, I would say, because it's one of the few freeways in the Houston metro area that is not consistently jammed up with traffic. Usually you can get through from downtown to the east reasonably well. Even, I mean, I would not say inbound during or like with peak traffic, but if you're going
Is that
opposite,
the most complex APL that I've ever seen?
the one on the upper left.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? This had to have been one of the first APLs put up in the Houston area, because this one's been up for a long time.
Yeah, and it's not exactly MUTCD compliant.
Yeah, well, you know what? I just tune out those words when people say they're not MUTCD compliant. You know why that is?
Because it doesn't matter whether they're compliant or not.
Well, that's part of it, but also, you know that Facebook group, there's no way that's MUTCD compliant or whatever the hell the name of that group is.
That's a spam group.
Yeah, well, they like at least 75% of what they post in there is in fact MUTCD compliant.
Quite so.
It just defeats the whole purpose of the group, right? It's stupid, but you know.
That's another topic.
That's another topic for another episode. All right.
The Gulf, the Galveston direction.
Now we go from downtown towards the coast on the southernmost section of I-45, which has its roots in the 1940s. Parts of it between Galveston and League City were completed in the 1940s as a divided highway. The first freeway mileage in Houston was built along what became known as the Gulf Freeway, opening to traffic in 1948. It was completed all the way out to Galveston by 1952. Significant modifications were made to the freeway in the 1980s. There is a long flyover system as you get closer to downtown Houston. That was put in the mid-1980s. Now, one of the sections of the freeway that became controversial right from the get-go was the section around the southern and western fringe of downtown Houston.
The Pierce Elevated.
The Pierce Elevated was constructed in the mid-1960s to run as an elevated highway roughly along Pierce Street. That section opened to traffic in 1967, serving as the connector between the main Gulf Freeway leading towards Galveston and the North Freeway leading northward from downtown in the direction of Conroe and the Woodlands. Texas DOT has known for a number of years that the Pierce Elevated was built with a limited lifespan of only about 60 years or so, which is not uncommon for a lot of urban freeway construction, at least on the interstate highway system, that is. And this is kind of the issue that we run into, is that so much of our infrastructure was built within a 10-year window that it all kind of was built with the same design life. So guess what? It all has to be replaced at roughly the same time, and that's becoming an issue as we're discovering.
Unfortunately, the plans for the near future don't involve replacement for the Pierce Elevated in 100% form.
Would you like to tell the nice people in the audience about that?
So there is a nice project that they're putting together, and overall the construction project is called the North Houston Highway Improvement Project, but we're going to focus on the Pierce Elevated, which is going to be the whole downtown freeway system is basically be torn out in sections and replaced in kind, and the weaving and they're going to be unweaving weaves of many of the interstates on the northeast side. So 69, 45, 10, and 59, they're going to be unweaved. They're going to be free-flowing and switching traffic in between in order to make it more efficient. But unfortunately, as you see here on the right-hand side of the slide, they're going to be burying the freeway of 45 and down and underneath and putting Park on top of it, covering it. And the downtown connectors will replace the Pierce Elevated, which means that 45 will be rerouted along 10, along to 59, and then rejoins its original location down where the Pierce Elevated is long gone. Whatever they have for the goals there is basically to help downtown regain control of its areas and bring back the neighborhoods. Whether that works or not, unknown. But it's also meant to help improve flood resiliency, support regional freight mobility, and maintain effectiveness of current hurricane evacuation. It's very tough to evacuate a town when they're all weaving and back and forth trying to get onto 45 north of town, or 45 or 69 for that matter. And also mitigate congestion. Lanes are going to be expanded, and they're going to be basically 45, 10, 59, 45. They're not going to be on the same roads going through town. They're going to be on separate rights of way. So there'll be many carriageways going through many lanes. Not going to match the Katy, though. So that is a multi-decade project. The overall project spans further north, but much of that is not fully realized or fully funded. As you see here, you have the various different colors representing the different interstates that are passing through town here. In the lower right, you'll see where the interchange is now. That's to be doesn't go further north. The green line is now a surface street.
Yeah, so I want to emphasize with the rendering on the upper left, and these are not completely final designs. These are just concept drawings, but I would imagine that the final design will be relatively similar to what you see here. I want to mention that the orange on this upper left, that's actually a placeholder for the Hardy connector, which we'll talk about more next week, but that is the southern extension of the Hardy toll road inside the 610 loop. And that's actually why they haven't built it yet, because they've been waiting for all these years to figure out what the heck's going on with this I-45 relocation before they proceed on construction of it. But that's what that is. If we return to this slide that we were on previously, Texas DOT began planning this project more than a decade ago, around the year 2010. They were asked to pause the work in 2021 by the Federal Highway Administration, which spent 2 years investigating environmental and civil rights complaints about the project, as it calls for the displacement of hundreds of homes and businesses in low-income communities of color. This is both in downtown along the eastern and northern flanks of the Central Business District, and further north along the I-45 North Freeway. Keep that in mind for a second here. Harris County also filed a federal lawsuit against Texas DOT in 2021, asking a judge to compel the state agency to respond to local concerns about those issues and how the project might exacerbate flooding risks, air pollution, and traffic congestion. Officials with Texas DOT, Harris County, and the city of Houston reached an agreement and a settlement about the project in 2022, with the county dropping its lawsuit against Texas DOT and the Federal Highway Administration lifting the pause on design and construction earlier in the year 2022. This allows Texas DOT to move forward with the project while pledging to improve its public engagement, allocate $30 million to help those who are displaced, and incorporate green space, sidewalks, and bicycle paths into the project design, among other concessions.
Wakey lanes.
All right. Let's understand something here right off the bat as I go into my own commentary on this project. This project is ridiculous. Just gonna come out and say it right from the start. One of the main complaints about the existing Houston freeway system is that the Pierce Elevated along Pierce Street cut off an entire section of Midtown Houston from the Central Business District, which it did. There's no question that the Pierce Elevated was a physical and psychological barrier separating residents from the downtown of the city just across the way. However, as you can probably tell from the renderings that we've been showing you, the solution that was arrived at in order to remedy the problem along Pierce Street is to create another psychological barrier along the eastern and northern flanks of downtown.
Yeah.
And forget about the fact that there's green space across from the convention center in Minute Maid Park, because that is a concession that was agreed to be studied. We don't actually know what that space is going to be used for. You notice how in all the renderings for that eastern side of the new loop that it is listed as potential open space for private funding and development, which means that the city and the state really aren't really going to have anything to do with what that space looks like in the future. That's the ridiculous part of this, that it was painted as a project to right a freeway wrong in the city of Houston. And I'm not disputing that the Pierce Elevated was a poorly conceived idea. I think we can have that conversation and have it make sense. But what I don't agree with is the city and the state, right on up to the U.S. Transportation of Secretary, saying that this is going to be a remedy to right a freeway wrong in Houston's past.
You can't just write a freeway wrong with another freeway wrong.
You can't look at this proposal and tell me that you are righting a wrong. Like, I'm not that stupid. I might be stupid, but I'm not that stupid. Okay. And if we had a living, breathing U.S. Secretary of Transportation, maybe projects like this would not be approved so willy-nilly. You know, I'm just saying, man. I gotta say what I have to say. This project is a bunch of nonsense. And the other thing, I don't know that you mentioned this, Scott, but the price tag?
Billions. Yeah, billions, yes, but is it really going to be that low?
Yeah, do we want to talk about the price tag for a second? This kind of bleeds into our next freeway, the North Freeway, because the North Freeway will be also adjusted as part of this. Basically from downtown Houston all the way up as far north as Beltway 8. It's about a 15-mile stretch of the North Freeway that will be expanded and widened. You're going to have an expansion of the main line. You're going to have new toll-managed lanes. So you're basically going to have the north side of Houston's equivalent of the Katy tollway. That's basically what they're planning to put in here. And you're going to have expansion of the frontage roads. And this goes back to what Scott was saying and what I was saying earlier about how you are going to displace hundreds and thousands of residents and businesses just to put in a freeway that you are claiming is righting a wrong that created a barrier that separated, neighborhoods and peoples from downtown.
When you did talk about not enough capacity to meet the demand, you make more capacity, it's induced demand. People are going to come and use it.
Well, yeah, and Houston is a city that was built for cars.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a reliable mass transit system in Houston. Mm-hmm. Even if, let's say that instead of this project, Houston committed that same $10 billion to building a commuter rail transit system. You would not get people to ride it because the city and its suburbs are just not built for it. And that's...
And the mentality of the people that live there isn't transit mentality.
Yeah, right. But we could get into an entire discussion about that if we wanted to. But the point is that transit is not an option around this area. So you're going to build these new managed lanes and you're going to build all these new freeway lanes, and within 5 years you're going to be right back where you started. And all you did was you created a much larger barrier on the east and north sides of downtown, and you also mowed down the neighborhoods on the north side of the city. Some of the most disenfranchised residents in the entire southeastern Texas, by the way. You know, you're claiming that you're helping disenfranchised people by removing the Pierce Elevated, yet you are, you know,
You're doing the opposite in this area.
Yeah, you're simply moving the injustice across town. And by the way, there's no guarantee that by removing the Pierce Elevator that you accomplish your goal in the first place.
Yeah.
By uniting Midtown and downtown. There's no guarantee that that even happens.
No, yeah.
So,
how do you know they're going to do it? You don't.
Well, and I think that we have enough studies from cities where this kind of thing has been done that the results have been pretty underwhelming in terms of neighborhood reunification. Because the problem is, yeah, you can erase the freeway from the map, but the effect of the freeway being built in the first place is permanent.
Yeah. You see that all over the nation, and I won't go into details because of the subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot. We're just kind of scratching the surface on this. There's a whole lot more that we could say about it, but as I said in my comments, this project is a joke. It's ridiculous, and it is not being built for the reason that state and federal officials are telling you it's being built for. Do not believe those officials when they tell you that they are righting a wrong when they clearly are not.
It's politics.
Well, unfortunately, yeah, it's about politics, it's about getting reelected, and it's about making money. That's really what it boils down to. And it's a shame that that's the case, right? But unfortunately, that's what we got. I don't even think, did we even get into the price tag of this? I know that we teased it, but
$9.5 billion plus.
Yeah, so that number includes the construction cost of everything downtown, relocating I-45, eliminating the Pierce Elevated, and all the upgrades to the I-45 corridor north of downtown, as far north as Beltway 8. That's where the $9.7 billion number is coming from. I am here to tell you that number is bullshit. There ain't no way that's getting built for 9.7. The thing that is the problem that people don't really understand is that the way that bids work nowadays is that contractors will always lowball them so that they can get in the door and win the job. And contractors will always make their money on delays and change orders. So, and this is not all being built under one contract. So Texas DOT is not signing an agreement with contractor X to build this project for $9.7 billion. It's probably going to get broken up into at least a dozen different contracts. But the point is that when you are building infrastructure in a fully developed urban area like Houston, there are all sorts of obstacles that you know about, and there are all sorts of unknowns that you don't know about when construction begins. And you are already working in cramped quarters as it is, right?
Yep.
The amount of overruns and change orders on an urban project like this will be massive.
It's the Texas way. And one of the chat's members mentioned, "Oh, you could build an entire metro system in Harris County for $9.5 billion." One could question that. I'm not a highway engineer, but I could say that Dan has already hit it on the head. It'll balloon no matter what type of transportation methods you put in because of contracts and scope creep. You're going to get ballooning of budgets because of that.
We don't build things cheaply anymore, you know. And that's not to say that the quality of the product is cheap. I'm talking about the financial side of it. Because the way that the system is set up, the money passes through so many different hands that everybody has to get their own slice of the pie. So that's how these costs end up ballooning, and you end up building something that, you know, was a fraction of that cost 50 years ago, even when you include inflation in the mix. And
right.
Yeah, so it's we don't have the ability to build infrastructure economically anymore. And the last thing that I will say about the price tag for this I-45 work, I know that I said that the 9.7 number was ridiculously low. I say these things because I have experience in the industry, right?
Right.
And I'm not going to be surprised if we're sitting here in 2 decades from now and construction is still ongoing and the cost is well in excess of 15.
Definitely. You've worked on projects that we have all driven that haven't met their goals.
That's putting it vaguely, but putting it accurately at the same time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, yeah. So the last thing, the estimated deadline for the completion of all the work on I-45 is the year 2042.
Keyword estimated.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen either. I'm telling you that right now. So, sometime in the 2040s if we're lucky. So Scott, we'll have to maybe you should. People are announcing road meets years in advance now. So maybe you should go on the forum and announce a Houston road meet for the year 2044. What do you say?
I'll be crippled by then. I'll be in my 70s by then.
That's 20 years from now, and they probably won't be done with it even then.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, at the rate that these things go, it's not going to surprise me. I mean, how long did the Big Dig take? And they were saying that was going to be a 5 or 6 year project.
It's still a problem.
Yeah, I don't think they ever actually finished the Big Dig, because as soon as they opened it, the roof tiles started falling off.
Yeah, and it's still leaking and everything.
Yeah, but that's another example that highlights how difficult it is to bring these highly developed urban projects in on budget and on time. It just does not happen that way.
Oh.
So yeah, it's gonna be a mess in Houston for years to come. So I'm glad that I got to document the Houston metro area for the pictures that you're seeing in this PowerPoint in 2023 before all the chaos began. Because I don't want to be anywhere near this area. Starting as early as this year, because the first contracts were let for construction in 2024. So,
right, thankfully, I'm going to get a chance to drive the Pierce Elevate before it goes away.
Yeah, well, you will. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'm only going to be there in a month.
Yeah.
Speaking of freeways, Eastex.
Yeah, so the US 59 freeway, as it's historically been known as, exists as there's an overlap exclusively with I-69 across the metro.
Nice.
So that interstate is more or less complete across Greater Houston. There are long-term plans to build the freeway northeasterly into Louisiana and southwesterly towards the Rio Grande Valley. The exit numbers that you see on this highway are relatively recent additions. I believe they are concurrent with the creation of the interstate highway on this corridor. The mile zero of I-69 is actually the city of Victoria, Texas. That is where the planned split in the highway, where you'll have I-69, E, C, and W. That's the point where that will happen. And the 3 auxiliary mainline routes, I guess that's what we're calling this, will have their own...
Who said you can't have splits in interstates anymore?
Yeah, it's just completely dumb what they're doing with that. But so the E, C, and W interstates will have their own mileposts that are independent from the I-69 mileposts, but that won't be confusing at all, right, folks?
I'm really confused.
Yeah, I'm confused.
To the fact that they chose the number that they chose is just, yeah.
I think basically all of the freeways in Houston have reversible high occupancy toll lanes running down the center of them. This slide features pictures from the I-69 US 59 express lanes in the northeast of Houston. They're all kind of set up in a similar fashion. There's one lane that reverses depending on peak hours. or the time of the day. And they are free to drive if you have a high occupancy vehicle. There is a toll that varies depending on the time of day if you are a single occupant vehicle. I believe the price cap to drive the entire length of any given HOT lane in Houston is $5. That's the highest toll I've ever seen. It's obviously the highest toll I've ever paid because I have documented the HOV lanes on these freeways in the past. The other side of the 6959 corridor leading away to the southwest of town is, you'll never believe me when I say this, but it is known as the Southwest Freeway. The path of the Southwest Freeway in the area of I-610 and leading westerly and southward towards Sugar Land is really centered around a real estate dispute from the 1950s and 60s, centered around the community of Sharpstown, which was developed in the 1950s as a typical suburban community. The Southwest Freeway was originally proposed to be routed through the West Park neighborhood to the north. However, the developer of Sharpstown, a gentleman named Frank Sharp, donated a 300-foot right-of-way strip through the Sharpstown neighborhood. And so that's why the Texas jumped at the opportunity. It was basically a free land grab for them. So they said, well, if you're donating this land, then I guess we're going to put our freeway right through your development. And that's exactly what happened. The feeder lanes in the Sharpstown area opened in 1960, and the freeway main line opened a few years thereafter. Interestingly, the section of the freeway near 610 and through the Sharpstown area has traffic volumes that exceed 300,000 vehicles a day on a regular basis, making it one of the busiest freeways not only in Texas but also in the United States. You also may be aware of the rather grand entrance into downtown that you are offered if you are approaching the city from the southwest heading northbound. This was originally, as we go to this slide, which shows what I'm talking about, this section through the near south side of the city and the adjacent museum district was built originally in the 1960s as an elevated freeway. It was reconstructed in the early 2000s where the freeway was put into a trench, as you can see here, and several signature arch bridges serving the local streets in the grid span the freeway overhead. So it creates a very interesting effect visually.
It had really, you can't get any good view of it from overall unless you had a drone, which you do.
Well, I have a little trick up my sleeve that most people don't have. So that's how you're able to get this view here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is an interesting space to drive through. By the way, this is kind of similar to what they did in Denver, taking an originally elevated freeway structure and placing the freeway below grade. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Only except this isn't quite the same because it's not a tunnel, but it is a similar concept.
Right. It's still a separator road like the inner loop is in Rochester, New York.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Last thing I want to mention, we don't really talk about music very much on this channel, but I do want to mention the song Midnight Special, which is a traditional folk song which was thought to have originated in the 1920s among prisoners in the American South. The song refers to the passenger train Midnight Special and is historically performed in a country blues style from the viewpoint of a prisoner. Later versions, the lyrics of this song have varied a bit over the years. As time has gone on, the lyrics have evolved to be more specific. The original song was a bit more vague in its placement and setting, but more recent performances of the song mention specifically the cities of Houston and Sugar Land, two cities that are connected by the Southwest Freeway. So perhaps the Midnight Special roamed these lands at one time or another. My favorite version of the song Midnight Special is the cover version that Paul McCartney did on his 1988 Russian album. It's actually the last song on that album. It is my favorite version of that song. It's one of my favorite cover songs that he ever did, period. So that'll give you something to listen to after the show if that appeals to you. All right, moving right along here. 610. Now, we did an entire virtual tour episode on the 610 loop, so I won't bore you to death with recapping everything that we talked about in that episode. If you would like to do a virtual tour of the 610, we have the episode on YouTube that you can go back and check out. Just to kind of give you a little bit of a Cliff Notes version, the Houston Loop was originally proposed as far back as 1941. It was known as the Defense Loop, and this was for military purposes strictly. It evolved into a general population highway in the years after World War II. Construction began as early as 1950 on what was originally designated as Texas Loop 137. It was added to the interstate system following the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. The loop was approved in its total back in 1960 when the East Loop was added to the system. It was originally a C-shaped highway, the East Loop being the last component of it to be approved. The freeway was fully complete by 1975. The Sidney Sherman Bridge over the Houston Ship Channel was completed in 1973. The Sidney Sherman Bridge is actually quite an interesting structure in its own right. It's been kind of it's been something that has come up every once in a while with industrial folks and marine interests along the Houston Ship Channel. It is a strutted girder bridge, which is to say that if I skip ahead here, where are my pictures of this bridge here? Here we go. Yeah. So on this slide here, you can really see this. You can see how the design of this bridge might be a problem because the steel support struts actually jut out into the channel, and so they kind of constrain the channel width beneath the roadway. And in case you're wondering, yes, these struts have actually been struck by passing ships more than a few times over the years. There was a significant impact in the early 2000s that forced a closure of the bridge for a couple of months in order to make repairs. There's no discussion, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can tell, when it comes to possibly replacing this bridge. It's not that the bridge is not structurally sound, it's just that it's a flawed design considering the amount of marine traffic that passes beneath it and the amount of risk involved with ship strikes and the fact that you have such a busy freeway being carried by it. So I don't know that that's something that might develop in future years, but that's kind of the deal that we have as of right now. And it's because of the dense industrial nature of both banks of the Houston Ship Channel in its area, it's very difficult to get pictures of this bridge, but this is one taken from a couple miles away that is pretty interesting, I think, and does a good job of painting the picture of what this bridge looks like structurally. Because when you're crossing this bridge, you don't even realize what it looks like underneath.
So basically taking the cantilever and put it underneath.
Yeah, and it utilizes the steel struts as its primary support mechanism, which, if there wasn't a busy ship channel underneath this bridge, this would not be an issue. But I don't think they expected the struts to become a navigation hazard.
Depends on where you dredge the water bottom.
Well, the ship channel has been dredged multiple times over the years. I think most recently in the 90s. Which we'll talk about in a little while. That was actually a pretty important moment in the history of the ship channel. But yeah, ever bigger ships are trying to access farther and farther west along the ship channel, and it's becoming a problem.
Yep, going to be containing cargo containers that are pretty much stacked high that you can't even see over them. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right, US 290 is the main thoroughfare that connects Houston with Austin, in the state capitol. There was
Weird.
a brief period of time when consideration was given to adding this corridor to the interstate highway system. It was ultimately passed over. They considered that the Houston to San Antonio corridor was more important for interstate commerce and for national defense purposes.
Now, I think that Austin wasn't as important at that time, which is why that probably happened. That seems to have been, they didn't exactly get that accurate, not knowing what's going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you ask people today, I'm sure they would say that there absolutely should be an interstate between Houston and Austin. And you wouldn't get much of an argument from me on that.
Yeah.
Austin
What would you put in there? Because you already took Interstate 14 and put it up on Killian.
Oh, well,
probably do another instance of you at I-12, perhaps?
Just do I-14S or something like that. I don't know. Texas is already putting lettered suffixes on all their interstates, so why not just do that for I-14?
Right, indeed.
Let's see here. So the other thing that was a brief flirtation with this highway was HECTRA, the Harris County Toll Road Authority, did try to get involved in creating toll-managed lanes along the Northwest Freeway back in the 2010s. They proposed a project called the Hempstead Tollway, which would have basically been the equivalent of the Katy Tollway on I-10. Ultimately, Texas officials pursued a different alternative for the reconstruction of US 290 in the northwest of the metro, which was completed in the early 2020s. So no, HECTRA did not get any real estate on the right-of-way here.
Screw it.
HECTRA does not have any involvement with the 288 freeway. However, Texas and Brazoria County do. Texas DOT manages the toll lanes that were added to the South Freeway in 2020. The South Freeway itself is one of the more recent additions to the Houston freeway grid. It did not see the light of day until the 1970s. It was completed south of I-610 in 1977. It did not open between 610 and downtown Houston until 1984. Now, the thing about this freeway that I find really interesting is that they built this freeway with a very wide median in the center, and they knew going in that this was a freeway that was possibly going to have to be expanded dramatically as suburbia reached further south and further out from the 610 loop, and that's exactly what ended up happening. This median has ultimately been filled in by tolled express lanes and a wider mainline freeway. Within Harris County, the toll lanes are managed by Texas DOT. Brazoria County they operate their own section of the toll lanes under the name of Brazoria County Expressway. They are the ones who operate and maintain that section of the toll lane system. So you have a weird setup where you have the same set of toll lanes, but they are operated, depending on where you are, by two different jurisdictions. And that's not the last time we will talk about something like that in Houston Metro, as you will find out in next week's episode. Not to spoil it too much for you guys. But yeah, this is probably I don't often get a case of sticker shock when driving toll express lanes, but I certainly got that when driving the 288 lanes.
Ridiculous.
I mean, look at the prices on this.
Forget it.
And this was actually off peak, so I'm assuming this is not the maximum rate that I paid, but when I went back and I looked at my toll tag statement, I did pay the max toll tag fee, even though it was off peak.
It has to be static.
I guess it is. I mean, that doesn't...
Because otherwise they'd be putting LED messages in there with the variable price. They can't advertise one price and make you pay another. there's no way that's going to work.
Yeah, so this maximum rate of $16, that basically it rates to about 50 cents per mile if you were to drive the entire length of this.
That's more expensive than Delaware.
Well, I guess. I mean,
rates up there with it, that's for sure.
yeah, it is. Yeah, this is not a joke. It's $16 to go one way on the Brazoria County / Texas DOT express lanes on 288. I mean, as I said, this is the only time that I've ever actually looked at the price and been like, "Holy shit!" You know, it's just like, are we serious here? And as you see in the pictures here, there's nobody with me.
No,
so
yeah, everybody went elsewhere because they're like, I'm not paying that price.
I will sit in a traffic jam for a half hour before I pay that rate, and I don't blame them. You know,
they got the cheaper Fort Bend tollway to the west, and for I-45 to the east.
Yeah, well, and yeah, it's like people like to call these toll lanes Lexus lanes. These aren't even Lexus lanes; they're Bentley lanes.
Aston Martin, Lamborghini lanes.
I mean, Max Verstappen might drive through here in his Red Bull Formula One car. That's about it.
Yeah, and he'll be getting ripped off because of how fast he drives.
Yeah, right.
Thankfully, that's not on my itinerary.
I mean, if I were you, I would skip it because
I have plans to skip it.
Yeah, I mean, just drive the general lanes, and you got the nice view of the stacks at Beltway 8 and 610 in the general lanes, just like you do in the toll lanes. Except you save, you know,
$20 a mile.
Yeah, I mean, I paid $32 round trip to clinch those toll lanes, and I feel dirty having done it.
Yeah,
like holy crap.
Now speaking of the 110. Oh wait, wrong city.
Well, this freeway kind of feels like the 110 out in Los Angeles to some extent because of the industrial setting. This one, of course, the 225 follows the south bank of the Houston Ship Channel. We're now back out east of the metro, out east of I-610. This was a freeway replacement for the original LaPorte-Houston Highway, which dates back to the years before World War II as a major thoroughfare for the eastern suburbs. You may notice that if you've ever been out this way, and perhaps you've noticed this on maps before, but yes, the freeway does abruptly dead end just west of I-610. The freeway was intended to continue west of 610 into downtown Houston. This extension, which was known on maps as the Harrisburg Freeway, was planned in the 1950s and 60s and lasted on planning maps as late as 1987. However, it was done away with by the mid-1970s. In case you were wondering, the freeway alignment would have roughly paralleled Harrisburg Street through the Harrisburg and 2nd Ward neighborhoods, which is why it became known as the Harrisburg Freeway. As originally planned, this freeway would have crossed through the industrial towns of LaPorte, Deer Park, and Pasadena, and then rolled right on west into downtown Houston. It would have had a western terminus. It would have dumped traffic onto the local street grid, more or less right where Minute Maid Park is today. Thousands of residents of Houston's East End protested the construction or the proposed construction of the Harrisburg Freeway in the early 1970s. In a rare move, the State Highway Department caved into their protest that the community would in fact be ripped in half by the construction of this highway. All serious thought of completing this freeway was dropped by the late 1970s. So here we have a rare example of a freeway that was successfully fought against by the local residents.
In Texas, for that matter.
Yeah, this is one of the rare cases of that.
Is this like these signs here? Did they borrow these from Mexico?
These signs have been around. These have been around for decades. These are old button copy signs that are located roughly along the alignment for the Harrisburg Freeway. So that's why I wanted to include them here. Let's see here. Memorial Drive. So this is not a Texas DOT highway, or it's not an interstate highway, it's not a state highway, it is a highway maintained by the city of Houston. Um, we can't talk about Memorial Drive without talking about Memorial Park and Camp Logan. So Camp Logan was a World War I era Army training camp in Houston. After the war, it was transferred back to the city of Houston and turned into Memorial Park. Um, so it became Houston's single largest green space area. The camp was originally named for Illinois' U.S. Senator and Civil War General John Logan. Easy for me to say. Memorial Drive was established as a scenic boulevard in 1920s. In the 1940s and 50s, it was gradually updated to what was considered for the time to be freeway standards. The Memorial Drive corridor was considered as a potential alignment for an east-west freeway from downtown Houston to the west. Ultimately, the alignment that was built as the Katy Freeway in the 1960s was chosen instead.
And that would be like an I-610 through New Orleans situation that they tried to do it the original way planned.
Yeah, so so obviously
Because it goes right through Memorial Park and...
Yeah, so to build the interstate through Memorial Park would have been a pain in the ass anyway because of the legal ramifications.
Yeah.
So the suitable alternative was the northern alternative, which ended up being built as the Katy Freeway.
Yep.
And if you want more old button copy signs, there's still a lot of that to be found along Memorial Drive. Hint, hint, Scott, if you're looking for old stuff.
Noted. I got spare time to play around with things in here.
Yeah, very good. All right, we have, let's see, honorable mentions. I'm going to zip through these as quick as I can. We have a few of them that we cannot part ways tonight without discussing for a moment at least. US 90 has a freeway section that leads northeasterly away from Houston and away from the eastern I-10-610 interchange. It's known as the Crosby Freeway. Parts of it are complete to freeway standards. Other parts remain to be constructed. There are sections of it where the frontage roads are completed, but not the main line. Construction on the freeway upgrade of the entire US 90 in the east part of Houston began in 2002 and remains in progress as of the recording of this episode. Texas Spur 330 is a spur off of I-10 east of Houston that directly serves central Baytown and connects I-10 with Highway 146 and the northern approach to the Fred Hartman Bridge. Texas Spur Highway 5. We haven't talked a whole lot about unbuilt freeways in Houston because there just aren't that many of them. But this is one that I should mention before we sign off this evening. This is the only completed section of what was known on planning maps as the Alvin Freeway. It connects the Gulf Freeway just south of downtown Houston, and it ends shortly thereafter, kind of unceremoniously. You can see the stub in the photo on your left. Mm-hmm. It ends, I believe this is near the University of Houston campus, if I have my compass screwed on correctly.
Alvin!
Yeah, right. The Alvin Freeway was planned to run southward from here, past 610 and past Beltway 8 into Brazoria County in the direction of the city of Alvin. And it would have been another north-south route to supplement the Gulf Freeway to the east and the South Freeway to the west. But the Alvin never saw the light of day, one of the few Houston freeways that can claim that.
The space for highway.
NASA 1, really quick. So Texas has a lot of different state highways. There's your blanket state highway, there's your farm to market route, there's your ranch to market route, there's your business route, there's your spur route, and then in this case we have a NASA route, which was designated in 1961 in conjunction with the completion of the Johnson Space Center that year. Most of the freeway section of it was completed in the 1970s as a bypass of the original NASA Parkway. The highway in this area always had a state highway designation. It was originally Farm to Market Route 528 before they rebranded it in the months after the Johnson Space Center's completion. But yes, in Texas, you can drive a NASA route.
Ooh. Yeah, it was like you got Beltway routes, you got NASA routes, rec roads.
That's right, I forgot about the Beltway route. Yeah, that's another one.
Yep. Well, we already talked about that last week.
Well, and we will talk about it next week, too.
Yep.
And I don't know, I might be a little bit biased, but the last thing we're going to mention is the best thing about Houston, I think, in my opinion, is in this civil engineer's opinion. Your experience and your mileage may vary. However, I think that Houston's signature bridge is worth a couple minutes of your time. The Fred Hartman Bridge, carrying Texas Highway 146 across the Houston Ship Channel far east from downtown Houston, was built between 1987 and 1995. It was built as a replacement of the original Baytown Tunnel, which was a 2-lane tunnel completed in 1953. The reason why they had to remove the tunnel was because of a project in the 1990s to deepen the Houston Ship Channel to a depth of 45 feet to allow for the passage of ever larger container and cargo ships into the Port of Houston. So the tunnel had to be removed, and so it was decided that rather than building a new tunnel, they would build a signature cable stay bridge, and this was the result that they came up with.
If you go back a slide, is there still evidence of the tunnel underneath the bridge?
Yes, there is. If you look at, it's not accessible to the public.
No.
I think the Port of Houston utilizes the area for their operations. But if you were to go on like Google Satellite View, there might even be a picture in here that shows this. But one of the approaches, at least one of the approaches to the tunnel, is still visible.
It looks to me like if you look at that drone shot, that the channel, the little swampland, the bayou there, that the surrounding sidewalk might still be part of it, but that's my guess.
Yeah, so you can kind of see it if we move to this slide, the picture in the upper left. You can kind of see where it would have been. It's kind of on the right there in the background. That's the general area where the tunnel portal was.
Yeah,
I'm looking to see.
Sense.
I'm looking to see if there's a better shot of it in the slides here. I'm also just, awestruck by the beauty of this bridge. I know that there's, cable stay bridges are kind of like, I find that in road enthusiasm at least, people either love them or they hate them. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of middle ground with them, but I don't know. Maybe this is because I'm biased because I helped bring one into this world, but I think they're dynamite. If they're done right,
fair, you're not going to build any more suspension bridges. Well, you're going to be building cable stays.
Yeah, well, so for the vast majority of large bridges that are built nowadays in the U.S., they have rather modest or, at biggest, intermediate length spans.
Yeah.
You're not building anything with a mile-long center span because it's not because we can't, it's because we don't need to.
You only need to clear the area for a ship. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, and so for a bridge like this, what the cable stay bridge did was it phased out the steel cantilever and the steel truss bridge.
Yep.
And for good reason, because when you break down like the weights and the dead loads that are applied on this structure, the cable stay bridge can be built at a fraction of the cost because it uses a fraction of the material. So rather than using huge steel members to do the supporting, you're using cables that are, a fraction of the size and fraction of the volume. Yet they accomplish the exact same goal.
Yeah.
And it's
I
just a
still see
much.
tied arch bridges being built.
Yeah, you are
And
seeing. Yeah, I feel like arches are starting to make a comeback, which is nice, which is good to see. Because
Mhm.
I will concede that cable stays are sort of becoming like the design that everybody automatically goes to, and I do appreciate that there is still some bit of variance when it comes to long span bridge construction.
Mhm.
Um,
There's so much water here that you almost have to have these things in order to span anything. The ship channel is just one, but I mean, you got all these pockets of water that are being filled very slowly, and you're just not going to be able to build on solid land anymore in this area.
yeah, that's always kind of been an issue here, solid ground.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, they were able to engineer this one just fine. So
It was like you're lucky to have surface roads on the Mississippi Delta in Louisiana.
yeah, well, we talked about that when we were talking about New Orleans and how it's just so hard to build large structures down the lower Mississippi River there because there's just no bedrock anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you kind of have a similar problem in Houston, although not to the same extent. But yeah, you do have
It's
issues
higher.
with.
It's a higher elevation. It's 50 feet above sea level in general.
Yeah, but even so, like it's the same gumbo soil in a lot of
Yeah.
areas. Because it is all still marshland and coastal wetland, just like it is in Louisiana. Um,
There's one question in the live chat if you have any images of the Galveston Causeway.
we didn't really talk about Galveston in this PowerPoint, and
Unfortunately.
perhaps we should have. I didn't include any footage of Galveston in here. Um, I never got to see the old causeway. I know that's where the question was asking. The new causeway is obviously much more recent. I don't have any pictures in here of that, but yeah, if you're interested in clinching the southern end of I-45, I definitely recommend it. The drive over the causeway is a neat experience, and the city of Galveston is worth visiting. I know that we kind of gave it the cold shoulder on this presentation, but that doesn't mean that it isn't worth a couple
But yeah.
hours detour.
But yeah, there is more of a fishing pier type of situation with the old road that Highway 75 followed.
Right, because it should be mentioned that I-45 essentially replaced the old US 75
Which,
from
yeah.
Galveston all the way up to Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that old causeway was originally US 75. That's right. And so if you visit Galveston, there's a memorial to the 1900 hurricane there that is worth visiting, and there's the seawall that's a part of it's a part of the lay of the land now. The seawall was constructed after the hurricane.
The hurricane was basically the catalyst behind the seawall in order to protect the city.
That's right. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not going to be. It's going to protect against common size hurricanes, 1s, 2s, maybe a 3. But if you get a 4 and a 5 in there, I mean, sure, Harvey was in there. You're going to see something going over the seawall.
Yeah, I think the strongest hurricane to hit Galveston directly since then was Hurricane Ike in 2011. And the seawall performed very well for that event, although I believe at landfall that was a Category 2 hurricane.
Yeah, and
so
the last Category 5 to hit U.S. land was Mitch in 18 or 17, one of those two. No, it wasn't Mitch.
No,
it was Michael.
That was Michael. Yeah,
Michael.
That was Florida.
Mitch was the one that hit the Central America.
Yeah, that one was a doozy also.
Mm-hmm. Mexico Beach. That's what I remember about my
Well,
car.
that's probably where you got confused there for a second.
Yeah, probably.
Um, the original set of Houston video uploads are from my first trip to the area in 2018. In 2023, I did a significant reshoot of most of the freeways and tollways in the metro. So the videos that we're going to see for at least a little while here are from the 2023 trip. And Scott, did I ever tell you about the Dodge Charger that I got on the winter trip from a year ago?
You did.
Yeah,
I know
so
you were driving that along the long bridge in Louisiana. Not, I mean, the one across the basin.
yeah, so you could see that's the raised hood on this thing is what you see on the bottom of the screen.
Oh yeah.
And this was the car where I got carried away and was like I was having fun with the gas pedal, and then I looked down and I'm going like 110, and I'm like, oh shit.
I didn't do that with the Camaro that I drove on the Big Island because it was not safe.
Oh yeah, right.
I mean, these muscle cars that you drive, you probably, I don't know if you hit rain with these things, but because they only put the standard tires that you put on like a Toyota Corolla or a Toyota Camry, you're not going to get enough traction with those things.
You might, yeah. I mean, you might as well put slick tires on this thing.
Yeah, and because I had to drive in rain in Hilo in a Convera convertible, and I kept hydroplaning.
Oh, that must have been fun.
So I probably had. I didn't check to see if I had bald tires, but I wouldn't be surprised that they were.
Hey man, like my Charger, I was driving it. It was a rental car, and I drove it like I stole it. You know,
Exactly.
because I was originally supposed to get a standard sedan, and of course they didn't have any. So they gave me a minivan, and I was like, I really hate this fucking thing. So I drove it for so I wanted to give it a chance, right? So I drove it for like a day. And I clinched a bunch of stuff in it, and at the end of that day I was like, no, I don't like this thing. So I brought it back to the airport. I rented it out of Hobby Airport. And so I was like, look, I want to exchange it for a sedan, because that's what I asked for. They come back a few minutes later, and they're like, well, the only thing we have is a Dodge Charger. So I'm like, well, I did say I wanted a sedan and I wanted a four-door, so I'm like, hey, you know what? Yeah. And it's like, it's
more
a complimentary
of a coupe than a sedan.
Yeah, so they basically gave me a complimentary upgrade, because that's the only thing that they had that was anything close to what I asked for.
Have you ever driven a Jeep Wrangler?
I don't think so.
I have. I was going to get a luxury SUV in Honolulu at first, and it's like they gave me a Mercedes, and the damn thing didn't have what I wanted, Apple CarPlay. So it's like at the time they only had the Model Year 2020 cars because they couldn't. They didn't buy any new cars after the pandemic, and it's like, okay, this is not going to sit. This is not going to sit well with me. So they gave me a deal on a Jeep Wrangler. I was like, okay, I'll take it, and I still came within budget.
Oh, all right.
I was like, okay, yep, but it throws up a little bit of an enthusiasm for trying to buy a Jeep, but in the end, I realized how much of vulnerability that I have by buying Jeeps because they don't have that good track record. So
yeah, I'm not too caught up on the track record business, but yeah, you do hear things. You do hear scuttlebutt every once in a while.
Oh yeah, and I'm a Hyundai guy, so that's why I stuck with that since 2009.
Yeah, I've had my Subaru now for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I just passed the anniversary like a couple weeks ago, and not a peep out of it in 3 years. So
that's good.
Yeah, I mean it's been great. So
My previous car, I hadn't had a peep out of it until I stopped driving it because of the pandemic, and then it started developing misses.
yeah, it was pissed off that you weren't driving it anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. And you can't you can't stop driving a car that you drive on a highway on a whim there, because otherwise it's going to start feeling the pain because it's not being used.
Yeah, right. So yeah, we are on I-45 North, approaching downtown Houston. I know that we touched on the Galveston hurricane, but we didn't really touch a lot on the history of hurricanes in Houston, because that is kind of a part of the city's history that I think we should mention at some point. But before we do that in earnest, I will direct your attention to. Please direct your attention to the area behind home plate. So on the screen right here, we have the long freeway ramps. You can see them off to the side that connect the Gulf Freeway with the US 59 and 288 freeways. They're on their own dedicated roadways, which were not completely in place in my first visit here in 2018. These were completed, I believe, around 2020. But you see here, those ramp movements get their own dedicated flyover. That goes on for quite a long time, as you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we get airborne here, as we fly over the Southwest Freeway, we will enter the Pierce Elevated Structure, which this is the area that's going to be completely redone, right? Where I-45 will be rerouted around the city on the east and the north side, but at least for the time being, we can still enjoy the Pierce Elevated Structure, which is what we are entering at this point. So you get the tour of downtown Houston from the elevated freeway that is soon to be no longer with us. At least probably in the next 10 years or so, it'll be a thing of the past.
And as always, long approach ramps and everything, that's a staple of Texas.
Yeah, well, they love their flyover ramps, and they love their huge-ass frontage road elevated ramps and all that other stuff, right?
Yep, exactly.
Let's put it in because we can.
Yep, exactly. This is Texas. But yeah, as you were saying about hurricanes, I was just taking a quick gander at things, and you've already mentioned the 1900 hurricane that went through Galveston. There's been several tropical storms and hurricanes that went through. Some notable ones: Tropical Storm Danielle hit Galveston Bay weekly as a weak storm in 1980 in Galveston Bay, and caused widespread flooding. Tropical Storm Allison hit there. Where did I see that?
Yeah, that's an important one. Allison was like the benchmark for
tropical
storms.
That hit Freeport, causing 3 deaths. Then produced torrential rainfall with amounts more than 10 inches over the upper Texas coast. Storm surge over 7 feet in Trinity Bay. As a result, Padre Island lost, and basically 400 million caused in there. You have Harvey hit there. That was one of the biggest ones. There was a second Allison. There was a second Allison that really drenched Houston hard.
The one in 1999, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. Like Allison was the one that set the benchmarks for like rainfall and all that stuff. All the records that Hurricane Harvey broke in 2017 were set originally by Tropical Storm Allison in 1999.
37 inches. I don't know why they put 36.99. They probably didn't want to break any more records.
Yeah,
it's just a little weird. But yeah, that was in 2001.
That was 2001. Okay.
Yeah, and in it didn't hit Houston itself, but Emily, Rita, both hit Texas indirectly as a result of their paths in 2005. That was the year that Katrina hit New Orleans.
Right.
Ike in 2008 was a large as a Category 2 in Galveston and had 20-foot surge in Galveston. Ida in 2009, minimal effects. Harvey, where the heck is the stuff on Harvey? There it is, 2017, make landfall in San Jose Island. And basically, it just did rotations around the area for days, dumping rain and throwing wind. It was a Category 4 when it landed. And it just basically did a lot of work on the floods and caused the bayous to overrun.
Yeah, I think so. Harvey kind of did the same thing that Allison did, where it made landfall and then it just parked itself over Houston.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's how you got the enormous rainfalls that you got in both of those storms.
Mm-hmm.
There are pictures from Allison, because at the time they were working on the construction of the US 59 project near the museum district, so they were in the process of lowering that below grade. There are pictures on the internet of that whole area basically being a swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, it's quite the scene, because when you look at the pictures, like, they have the arch bridges complete, and so when you look at it, at first you just think that it's like, oh, this is an arch bridge over a canal or some body of water. No, that's actually a freeway that's down there. It is like under 15 feet of water or whatever it was. It was wild. And then Harvey came along, and like I said, like, all the records that Harvey broke were originally set by Allison in 2001. And that completely, there was like 40 or 50 inches of rain reported in parts of Houston Metro because of that storm.
So go ahead.
My first visit to Houston was in January of 18, so this was not even a year after Harvey, and you could still tell, like along the Buffalo Bayou, along Memorial Drive, which parallels the bayou, like, the vegetation had been stripped away by all the floods.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was still in a state of trying to get things back together again in large parts of the metro at that point in time. And Harvey, to this day, I mean, it wasn't the strongest hurricane to make landfall, but it certainly is one of the most destructive hurricanes in modern history because of the rainfall and because it happened to coincide with one of the largest metro areas in the U.S.
Huh. Now, looking at this video that you have now of I-45 here, and I saw a speed limit of 60 here, which does not surprise me. And you notice back before we start getting these intertwined ramps that you have frontage road and freeway separated by just grass. I was in Metro Dallas in 2002 and got caught in traffic, and I've mentioned this on previous videos this year that you could see traffic get stuck, get impatient, cross over to the frontage roads. And can you do that here? Possibly. I don't know if you want to get caught doing that, but I don't know how much they're enforcing.
Well, I would imagine there wouldn't be a whole lot of enforcement anyway, because most of the time you're just sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Just like now.
Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to get to freeway speed in a lot of cases.
Exactly. That's the thing. I mean, you talk about slow speeds like here, speed limits here. You shouldn't really complain about speed limits here because the speed limit, the amount of traffic that's on this freeway is just too much.
Well, and you should also keep in mind that I think that the speed limits in Houston are the lowest of any urban area in Texas.
Yep, I mentioned that previously.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because so much of the freeway system here was developed before the creation of the interstate system.
Mm-hmm.
Large sections of the Houston freeway system that are in use today were under construction as early as the late 1940s. And were put into service before the Federal Aid Highway Act was a thing. And so a lot of the sections, particularly of I-45, were completed, and even large sections of 610 they were completed before the interstate system was a reality. So these freeways were simply grandfathered into the interstate system. And they
Is
weren't
that the
really
skyline being blurred?
So in Houston, it's very rare that you ever get a clear view of the skyline because there's always this really weird, like cloudy, hazy look to things.
Smog.
I don't know if it's that,
Can't
but
be
it's
smog
just
because air can travel freely in that area.
yeah. But I mean, the humidity of this area is very Louisianan in nature, and so
Even in January.
yeah, even in the winter months. Yep.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and it's just there's always sort of a gloomy cast to the sky around Houston, I find. I don't know really what that is. I'm sure there's some sort of meteorological explanation for it, but um, there's that show that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It is never sunny in Houston. It's just humid and disgusting.
Will Carpenter mentioned, I think he's referring to my mentioning of crossing the grass in the frontage roads, a Texit ramp.
That is a very Texan maneuver. I agree with that.
I gotta look that up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never tried that myself, but
no, but I mean,
it doesn't surprise me.
The exit ramps in Texas just have the unique nature of them because most of the frontage roads parallel in one-way format the freeway. In fact, you notice how many places on the freeway that have addresses that you have 2345 Interstate 10 or 2535 LBJ Freeway.
Yeah,
road. You basically got businesses on the frontage road. This must be the long carpool lane here. The flyover here.
So that was the HOV flyover.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that was the ramp that was put in like around the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that I've actually driven that ramp as a single occupant. So, haha.
Hey, I didn't hear anything about what you were talking about.
You did. Hey, you know.
What were we talking about again? Oh, yeah, never mind.
I have a YouTube channel and I do what I gotta do. You know?
Exactly.
So.
And yeah, you're talking about ancient freeways in this area. Yeah, no shoulders.
Yeah, so this is kind of what this helps explain the speed limit difference in Houston versus other cities, just because you know that once they slapped the interstate shield on these pre-existing highways, they were like, well, that means that we don't have to do the upgrades. So it ended up that a lot of these freeways just haven't changed all that much over the years.
Yeah, and of course this project that's coming up is changing all that. So whatever.
Yeah, so this section of I-10 along the north side of downtown Houston is going to be modified significantly as well because you're going to have the I-45 main line joining in here for a little while.
It's going to be the way that they have it planned. They're going to tear it out and rebuild it.
Yeah, so this is why this project is going to take more than 20 years to complete because it's so many different moving parts on a series of freeways that are already heavily congested as it is.
Yeah.
It is going to be one giant ass headache for many years in this part of Texas. And I'm very glad that I don't have to live here and be a part of that nonsense.
Same. I'm pretty much done moving for as far as I'm concerned. I probably might eat those words.
Well, I'm not expecting to have to visit here for at least a number of years. I would like to come back once they finish the.
And you'll get the chance more than I do.
Well, I was gonna say maybe they'll finish the new Beltway 8 toll bridge.
We'll see.
Maybe. How many years has that been going on for now? Still not even close.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a subject for next week.
Exactly. Yes, I hate to say this, but yes, I am going down here the first week of April. I will be in Texas, and the first 2 weeks in April, I will be in Houston first after just passing through Dallas on the Tex Express. Then San Antonio, which I'm going to be spending the 8th of April over in Kerrville, getting my eyes burnt out before I see the total eclipse. And then I'll be doing some toll road driving in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Well, you've been a panelist on all of the Houston shows that we've done, so I hope
so far.
So far, anyway, yeah. So hopefully I've helped give you some ideas as far as stuff you want to see and stuff you might want to avoid.
Yeah. I know one thing to avoid. It got awfully expensive toll road.
Well, I'm glad I talked you out of that.
And in fact, like I said before, that's not on my itinerary.
I approve of that measure.
It wasn't to begin with if I didn't even think about the prices there.
Yeah, well.
Or maybe I was and I forgot that research. I was trying to look for all these toll agencies and see what they say and like that. And it's like, oh, all these agencies that you have here that take care of the main roads in the state of Texas is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, Austin and Houston are the biggest guilty players of this.
Yeah, so Austin is its own animal because they have their own regional tolling authority. That's kind of similar.
Which one?
It's kind of similar to Houston.
They got multiple.
I guess they have multiple if you include Texas DOT and also the private
drop
joint
Texas
venture
dot and you still got multiple.
Yeah, but you also have the private joint venture on the section of 130.
Yeah.
So
drop that.
Three.
You still got 3.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like when you talk about SunPass, the private joint venture in Texas dot don't accept SunPass.
Yeah, well, Central Texas is a mess of its own. Yeah.
Agreed.
And yeah, Austin's another city that's ballooning in size.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Keep it that way. Keep it that way.
Yeah, Austin is going to be over 1 million people. If it isn't already, it might have.
It's surpassed San Antonio when it comes to largest cities in Texas. It's third.
Is it now third? Because
yes,
maybe in terms of MSA, it's third.
It's top 10 USA now.
Okay, yeah. So it probably it probably crossed 1 million recently, which would not surprise me.
Don't forget the live chat, and don't forget to put your questions in if you have any.
Yeah, we're gonna keep going with the video for a few more minutes here. So if you guys have anything that you think we should address that we haven't already, or if you have questions about what you saw in the PowerPoint, myself and my fearless comrade here, Sconson, will do our best to help you out.
And yeah, Silent Bob here said, peak demand pricing brought to you by Wendy's.
Yeah, so that was in the news recently, right?
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna do some peak pricing in our food joint ventures. What are you gonna do? Scare all the customers away? Oh, wait, that's not how it works.
Yeah, well, I think. I actually think that that's going to be a thing in the future, and that what you saw with the whole Wendy's thing was simply a dry run to see what the public reaction would be.
Oh, they reacted.
Well, they reacted, but these things that become commonplace always start out as these little things that there's public outcry against, and then before you know it, they're mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
So I am not going to be surprised if we're sitting here and this is an actual thing.
No.
Like not soon, but like
somebody wants to make a profit. That's what it is.
That's all it is, right? So like in 5 years, will this be a thing? Yeah, I think it will be.
It's like raise prices. Step 2, question. Step 3, profit.
Yeah, it's only about the money nowadays, right? And this is
Yeah.
true in the restaurant business, and it's true in
On the
everything, like
highways.
sports, all that stuff.
Yeah. That's what the luxury slates do.
Yep.
TC Jester. Any caps? So where are we now? It looks. This is not the Katy Freeway. It looks like.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's I-10.
Yeah, we're on 10 now. We're west of downtown, so this is officially the Katy Freeway. This is not the part that has like the bazillion lanes just yet, but
Okay.
we're getting close to that point. It really opens up into this monster once you get to the 610 interchange.
It's between 610 and Beltway 8 that is the math monster.
Yeah. And even like I think even more recently, this was extended further west out to the Grand Parkway now.
I believe you might be right.
Yeah.
I was taking looks at it on Google's and trying to find out what I'm looking forward to. I've been trying to plan this Texas trip for over 4 years, and the first attempt that I did got derailed by COVID. The second one was priorities, and finally I was like, okay, I'll just surround the eclipse with it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many overpasses on this thing. This is probably dug in very much.
Well, the only thing that I was disappointed in when I redrove the Katy Freeway in 2023 was that they didn't have dedicated like off ramps and a dedicated interchange for the Buc-ees in Katy.
That does
Although
surprise me.
Maybe that'll be with how busy that one is. Maybe that'll be a thing someday. Like they'll have their
the thing
own
is,
dedicated
it's like
interchange.
the way the Buc-ee's gets in there is they're going to they're part of their strategy for doing that involves substandard interchange. Okay, we'll help you out. That's what they're doing up in the Forest, Wisconsin. Is they want to do rebuild Highway V's interchange with the triplex, and put the Buc-ee's in that big corner. And I don't think this Buc-ee's is going to be that big, but I could be wrong. But I mean, there's a substantial amount of space there that could be used. 6959 we're on.
I'll give you the trip through town on 6959.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very nice drive, I would say.
And it looks like a nice forest of interchange.
Yeah, that interchange has been rebuilt in the last few years. I think it was one of the older stack interchanges in Houston, and then they rebuilt all the flyovers and all the mainline movements in a project that I believe was completed late in 2023. It was interesting because they had just started the project when I visited in 2018, and they were in the final stage of it in 2023 when I visited the second time.
I think the big challenge this year is going to be driving a 610.
Yeah.
Because they got construction projects all over the place on that road.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, I may have misspoke when I said that my hotel for Houston was off of 610. I was wrong. It's actually off of Beltway 8.
Well, I mean, it is easy to confuse them all, so I get it.
Exactly.
It's one of the only big cities in America where you can confuse the beltways.
Yeah, exactly. You got multiple beltways on almost every city in Texas, even the small ones.
That's right. Yeah, and then in the case of this freeway, you notice how, like, you feel as if you're in some different central business district because of all the high-rises along the highway.
Right, and this is still not this is no longer downtown Houston, though.
No, we crossed past the 610 at the start of the video, so we're still a few miles out from downtown.
Oh yeah, there's little patches of skyline all over the place, of mini downtowns all over the place in these cities.
Yeah.
I mean, L.A., Chicago, Metro New York, that has, I mean, you got like even New York City itself proper. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell downtown Brooklyn from the rest of Manhattan, but it is definitely separate.
Mm-hmm. Here is the gateway that I was alluding to before. So we get to pass under the arches. We transition into a below grade freeway at this point.
This guy.
Yeah, this is a pretty neat drive. Of course,
It
when
does
you're
look like
driving this,
age.
well, when you're driving this in general, chances are that you're going to be like, maybe you get to 20 miles an hour in most cases.
Because of the traffic.
This is one of the more heavier congested sections of the Houston freeway system.
Noted.
So you get an awful long time to stare at the arch bridges above you. But in this case,
amongst other things like the sign bridges being contoured into the arches, the overhead lighting being contoured into the arches.
yeah, it actually looks pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
They did a good job with it. But yeah, we managed to get through at freeway speed this time around.
Was this on a Sunday morning?
It was something like that. I mean, in a place like Houston, on a weekend morning, you might get a couple of hours of window where things are free flowing. And that's.
But it's not like New York City type thing.
It's similar. I mean, once you get to a city that's as large as Houston, where it's multiple millions of people, you have the same problem. You know, it all sort of becomes the same issue.
Right, because I took advantage of a Sunday morning to drive in Manhattan itself and be able to drive Park Avenue and drive some of the areas. But I mean, obviously, when I've also done Manhattan on a normal day, where I've entered on a Holland Tunnel and driven around the FDR Drive, and it was nasty at that point too. I mean, yeah. I was lucky to be able to go fast speed on the FDR Drive as it is on that day.
Yeah.
But I mean, exiting the Holland Tunnel, where the heck am I?
So. Oh yes, AKA the eastern terminus of I-78.
Exactly. Exit 1, exit 2, exit 3, exit 4, exit 5.
Yeah, that I can't really explain that nonsense that happens there. It's
like the part that goes that grade. Yep.
It's like, yeah, I mean, it's like the toilet bowl of Manhattan. Like, you get into that and you just go around and around. And you come out the other end and you're like, where the hell am I? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I've shown you the Pierce elevated on I-45. I've shown you I-10 across the north side. And all of these flyovers and viaducts above us are going to be replaced on the east side of town as part of this upcoming work that we've been talking about quite a bit on this program. So you're getting the full appraisal of everything that's going to be wiped out and rebuilt. This elevated structure that we're traversing right now between I-45 and I-10, this is going to be the section that gets transitioned into a below-grade structure. So this entire elevated freeway is going to be now below grade, probably in some sort of cap structure that will allow for green space or some other kind of development over the top of it.
They don't have any official decisions on it yet.
No, as we mentioned, this is kind of like they think it's going to be a cap, but they have no idea what the hell is going to be on that cap. Or even if it's going to be a cap at all. They just think it's going to be a below-grade freeway at this point. So,
which is just as bad as what the elevated would be.
Yeah, because instead of
something that they don't that's something that they don't care to realize, perhaps.
Well, yeah, because instead of a wall, as it were, you're building a crater.
Yeah.
It's still a barrier.
Depending if a hurricane just went through.
Yeah, I mean it's still a barrier, right? It's just...
right. And there was a question back there back in the chat earlier this when you were talking about the project. aren't they defeating the purpose of flood mitigation when they're building a crater like that? And I think they are.
It is hard to disagree with that assessment. I don't really see how. I don't see how you're helping the issue by by creating another low point.
No, because you're just basically inviting the opportunity for another swimming pool.
I mean, that's why, like, when we talked about New Orleans, you noticed how all the freeways, or the vast majority of freeway mileage in greater New Orleans, is elevated highway.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because of drainage.
Yeah.
So it's not very smart in a city like Houston that is already right at sea level as it is to be building these below-grade structures where drainage is such a problem in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, with New Orleans, you notice how the overpass approaches basically are right at ground.
Yeah.
And that seems to happen somewhat here too. Not as obvious there, but it does. But it's like it's so low, so close to sea level in New Orleans that you can't really do anything on there because and the ground structure also prevents the loads from being placed on approaches.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I mean, how many different ways can you say that a project is silly? But
many in this situation.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's what we have to deal with, and that's what Houstonians will have to deal with in terms of construction for the next 2 decades.
Yep. But yep, if you want your tourist stack interchanges, just go to any Texas city.
Yeah, any of the big cities, right? Like
Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, you name it.
Yeah, even El Paso has some really impressive interchanges. Yeah.
Yes, they do.
And like in Austin, they've built quite a few of them.
Mm-hmm. Austin, they have the offset double-decker I-35, similar to what they have in San Antonio's downtown.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. So you got the double-deck freeways with the express lanes both here in Houston and in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Yeah, so you have quite a lot of options to choose from.
Yep.
I think we will do this last video of the Fred Hartman Bridge, and then we will call it a night. I want to thank Sconson for being a part of tonight's program. It's always good to have you.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
I was gonna do this show solo until I saw you were interested in being a part of it. So thank you for rescuing me from having to do another episode by myself.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so we have 2 more weeks of programs after tonight. We have next week's show, which is going to be the second part of our Houston examination. And then we have our final episode, which will be March 16th, which is officially designated as Untitled Webinar Project. And we will be giving out some details of what that is in more particulars during next week's program. So it's kind of classified right now as the mystery episode, but we will give you a lot more detail as to what this season finale looks like at the end of next week's PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll want to tune in just for that, because next week's PowerPoint is going to be boring. It's going to be toll roads, and nobody wants to talk about toll roads. Ew. So,
no.
So just tune in for our little preview of the season finale instead, and you'll still get to watch, and it'll be great. So
I was just here for Godzilla.
Yeah, so or whatever. So But yeah, I would say that a trip over the Fred Hartman Bridge is a good way to close out tonight's episode. So
it's a good thing went in this direction on this video.
Well, I ended up getting stuck going the other way.
I would imagine why.
That video did not make the final cut, fortunately.
I can see why.
Yeah. I think they were just doing. I think this was on a weekday. I think, and
and they were doing either inspections or cleaning of the underside of the bridge, from what I saw.
Yeah, and they just decided in the middle of the day to close 3 lanes of the bridge.
Too many.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we're gonna shut down 3 lanes of this bridge because we can. So.
They might have had a reason for doing it, but they just didn't. They didn't get the explanation on the radio.
I'm perfectly fine if there was a reason for it. I just was like, I was not made aware of it, so I'm like, oh, hello. But,
Toll road begins. Guess where he's going?
Yeah, so this I think this was where the
99.
Yeah, so this is where I started filming the Grand Parkway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
ain't so grand here.
Not really, but we will save that discussion for next week.
Next week. Tune in next week. You'll find out.
Yeah, tune in next week where we get to talk about paying tolls for 2 hours, which I'm sure will make you all overjoyed.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, we're going to wrap it up here, I think. So thank you, Wisconsin, for being my guest host this evening.
Right.
And I hope you found this episode useful. It was a lot of fun to put this together, as it always is every week. And we look forward to seeing you guys on our next episode, which will be next Saturday. We'll be talking about the toll roads of Houston. So we're staying right in southeast Texas. We're just going to pivot to cover the other highways in the metro. So I hope you can join us for that. And until then, we're going to sign off. So until next weekend, happy travels, take care, and we will talk to you all next time.
See ya.